One of the largest pop culture phenomenons of today is the book series and television show Game of Thrones. Both the characters and events in Game of Thrones were based off historical events in medieval England. Medieval England experienced a series of battles between different families, all fighting over the English royal throne. This time period was known as the Wars of the Roses. The Wars of the Roses served as an inspiration towards the popular television show and book series Game of Thrones and can foreshadow the ending result of the series. One character inspiration from Game of Thrones is Edward of Lancaster. Edward of Lancaster, a former crown prince, drew an inspiration towards the character of King Joffrey. Edward of Lancaster was the son of King Henry VI and Margaret of Anjou. His mother was hated by the people and seen as a witch and serves as inspiration for Cersei Lannister. According to a first-hand letter written in 1467, Prince Edward talked of nothing but of cutting off the heads of those who disobeyed him at the young age of 13. He was seen as young and foolish and ended up being killed at the Battle of Tewkesbury. The character of Joffrey is one of, if not the most hated character in Game of Thrones, and is known for being entranced by torture and is constantly seen enjoying others suffering in front of him. Like Edward, he was hated by the people, and both the characters and the audience cheered when he finally died. Another character inspiration for Game of Thrones is George Plantagenet. George Plantagenet drew an inspiration towards the character of Theon Greyjoy. George was the brother to King Edward IV and grew envious of his king brother, who wasn't the king by blood, but by battle. George secretly joined the rival family and tried to overthrow his brother off the throne. He failed and was accused of treason and drowned to death in a barrel of wine. The character of Theon Greyjoy drew inspiration from George by betraying the man he saw as a brother, Robb Stark, also known as the King of the North. Theon sacked and took over Robb's kingdom, or Winterfell, when Robb's attentions were towards his war with the Lannisters. Unlike his historical counterpart, he was actually successful but was not killed for it. However, he does receive a severe punishment. Another character inspiration from Game of Thrones is King Edward IV. King Edward IV drew an inspiration towards the character of Robb Stark. He was known not for only being a leader and a warrior, but was seen as a middle-class king, meaning he enjoyed spending time with the middle class way more than the people at court. He secretly married Elizabeth Woodville, the daughter of a merchant, completely angering his advisors. The character of Robb Stark drew inspiration from King Edward IV by having him lead the Northern Army against the Lannisters and is dubbed the King of the North, when he would marry a common woman in secret that ultimately led him to his death. Edward and Elizabeth's marriage didn't result in their deaths. However, after Edward dies, Elizabeth's enemies declare her marriage and children illegitimate, and in a world where name is everything, this was similar to a family in exile. The final character inspiration for Game of Thrones was Henry Tudor. Henry Tudor drew an inspiration towards the character of Jon Snow. He was raised in exile by his uncle and grew up learning how to fight. His father died before he was born, and it was very rare that he could see his mother. Henry was in hiding because he was a major threat to the family who had just won the throne of England. His father was the half-brother of the newly deposed Mad King, and his mother was the granddaughter to the brother of King Henry IV. After the death of Edward of Lancaster, who was mentioned before, Henry was suddenly the heir to the Lancaster line. Henry would then fight King Richard III, who also provides some inspiration for Joffrey, but not nearly as much as Edward did, at Bosworth Field, where he would win and become King Henry VII, and then would go on to become the father of England's most famous dynasty. The character of Jon Snow drew inspiration from King Henry VII by having him be the bastard who was sent to the wall to become a soldier and learn to fight, only to discover that he is the true heir to the Targaryen line. Jon didn't really know his parents or anything about them, similar to how Henry never met his father and didn't really know his mother until he was the King of England. English history has served as a structure for Game of Thrones and has the opportunity to answer the popular question, who will win the Game of Thrones? Historically, Henry Tudor, who earlier was mentioned to resemble Jon Snow, wins the crown and fathers England's most popular dynasty. Does this mean that the series will end with Jon Snow on the Iron Throne? Maybe. The Wars of the Roses served as an inspiration towards the popular television show and book series Game of Thrones and can foreshadow the ending results of the series.